So welcome to the IDEA Speaker Series. Our regular host, Dan Samosh, is off for this week, so I'm filling in for him. I'm Emile Tompa, Executive Director of IDEA and Senior Scientist at the Institute for Work and Health. Hosting with me is Francis Fung, Engagement Co-Lead for IDEA and Rehabilitation and Clinical Service National Manager for the March of Dimes. Please note, we are recording this session and recordings will be made available in our IDEA website, www.idea-idea.ca. That's www.idea-idea.ca. For those of you who may not know much about IDEA, it is a social innovation laboratory focused on helping create stronger and more diverse labor markets that include persons with disabilities through to practice. IDEA is the acronym for Inclusive Design for Employment Access. Before we dive into the webinar, I'd like to share a land acknowledgement relevant to the IDEA National Office in Toronto. So where the National Office of IDEA's Social Innovation Laboratory is situated has for thousands of years been the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this land is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to conduct our work on it. Please note that this is the acknowledgement that is relevant for the Toronto area. However, since we're gathering for this meeting virtually, we suggest you think about the communities in your respective locations as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Francis to introduce the webinar and the speaker for today's session.
Thanks, Emile. And if you're new to the monthly speaker series, the series serves as an opportunity to hear the latest about current topics in the work disability policy arena and learn about activities underway within and beyond IDEA. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I want to let you know that we will be hosting a Q&A session at the end of the webinar for about 10 to 15 minutes. But you can type your questions in the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Our speaker for today is Dr. Jutta Treviñanos, the founder and director of the Inclusive Design Research Center and a professor at OCAD University. Jutta is also a co-lead for IDEA's Hub on disruptive technologies and the future of work. Jutta has coordinated many research networks focused on future of work and employment with and by people with disabilities. Jutta's vast achievements include the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal and being recognized for her work in inclusive artificial intelligence recently by Women in AI with the AI for Good DEI AI Leader of the Year Award in 2022, as well as being listed as one of the top brilliant and inspiring women by Women in AI Ethics this year. Jutta is a world expert and takes on many advisory roles, and of note, she is the current chairperson of the Accessible and Equitable Artificial Intelligence Systems Standards Committee. Jutta is joining us today for her presentation titled Addressing the Opportunities and Risk of Artificial Intelligence. And I hope you are as excited as I am for this. So welcome, Jutta, and thank you for being here. It's a privilege to introduce to you, and now over to you.
Thank you, Francis and Emile, and thank you to the IDEA Project for supporting some of the work that I'm going to be talking about. So as Francis mentioned, I've addressed my talk addressing the risks, or I've named my talk addressing the risks and opportunities of artificial intelligence. And AI is a technology, but as we've come to realize that AI is, as a technology, involves organization, procedures, symbols, new words, equations, and most of all, the mindset. And I hope to address all of these aspects of AI as it relates to work and disability. Given the aspirations of AI developers to turn over decision-making to AI, we've advocated that what we need to do is to progress at the speed of trust, and trust that is earned and maintained. And unfortunately, when we hear about trust from AI developers, as I heard about yesterday, I was in the World Summit on AI, where many of the leaders of AI were present and were presenting. A common thread was trust us to break things, to make mistakes, and to push forward due to geopolitical and economic imperatives. But to have the right to ask this of the community, the disability community and the accessibility community, these developers need to have a deeper understanding of the relationship between disability and technology. There's a saying, for most people, technology makes things convenient. If you have a disability, technology makes things possible. And therein lies an awesome responsibility, because technology is relied upon to speak, read, write, learn, affect the world, navigate the world, eat, express love, remember, plan, breathe, and even love and live. Our relationship to technology is by necessity more intimate. It is essential because if you have a disability, you usually have no choice. It is what makes things possible. This relationship also makes people more vulnerable. We should not have to give our trust to an abusive partner. And people with disabilities are disproportionately vulnerable to the mistakes, to the breaking of these technologies. Beyond guarding our homes, it is implanted in our brains and in our vital organs. And if you have a disability, the opportunities and the risks are at the extremes. And the extreme opportunities often mean that people with disabilities are the poster child of AI. They are used to justify the risks and the need for progress. And the extremes should not be ignored. There are extreme opportunities. There are opportunities to recognize speech, gestures, patterns, find a target object or pattern, match and label objects, remember forever and remind on time, sort possible paths to find the optimum, detect common mistakes and correct them. There is a huge number of assistive technology or miraculous technologies that change people's lives emerging all the time. It is wonderful at mechanizing the formulaic, recognizing objects if you're blind, translating gestures, acting as robotic personal service workers, creating intelligent prosthetics, restoring vision, reading your mind through your EEG patterns. No wonder disability is a poster child of AI. There's a new assistive technology announced almost every week. Among the current functions, there is AI for image to text description, such as Be My Eye, Seeing AI, JAWS Picture Smart AI, and there was just a new one released yesterday. There's real-time captioning. We're using it probably right now, and that is emerging on glasses, so you can see the captions on your glasses. With transcribed glass. There's sound filtering so that we can get rid of the noisy environments. There is voice control, such as voice ITT. There is personal voice output announced by Apple Personal Voice. Exoskeleton optimization. Stanford has an exoskeleton that they have just published regarding gesture control. And among these are Cephable, the wheelie, which allows you to control your wheelchairs through gestures. Smart home systems and robotic assistance, memory and recall, rewind AI, simplification and summation, detangle AI, writing support. I'm sure that many of you have used ChatGPT. And of course, many of you will have heard of Elon Musk's announcement regarding his foray into the brain-computer interface, so implantable AI in your brains. And not just for assistive technology, but in the area of accommodations and disability supports, there are assessment tools, monitoring and evaluation tools, training and configuration tools that are using AI. But even in these extreme opportunities and these amazing life-changing technologies, there are flies in the ointment. AI in assistive technology can lead to privacy breaches and data abuse and misuse, surveillance and manipulation, homogenization, inverse benefits, connectivity issues, and hallucination. In terms of privacy breaches, how many of you have just simply said, agree to the service contract? And often what happens is you have to agree in order to use the technology. And therefore, you're making yourself vulnerable to data sharing. Who else gets the data, especially if we're videoing our family to find out what the label is on a piece of medicine? And there is an emergence of on-device AI, but at the moment, most of these technologies are going to the cloud and therefore become data that is then fed to an AI system, which of course is often not very well protected. We're exposing ourselves to surveillance and manipulation. The AT user, but also the individuals that are helping someone. Targeted advertising, there is quite a bit of data gathered regarding our reaction to advertising, which then causes additional targeted advertising and a manipulation towards purchasing or messages that are somewhat manipulative. Stereotypical optimization metrics are often making assumptions about us that may not be accurate or that we may not want to reveal to an AI or others that are using the AI. And then there's a pressure to be typical. AI is a homogenization system. Because AI can hide your uniqueness, does it make it harder for people who can't use the AI? We have a loss of differentiation. And unfortunately, the benefits of AI are inverse to the needs because the AI systems work the worst for people that need it the most. If you have a voice that or speech that is far from the average, if you live in an environment that is far from the place where the AI was trained, if you use a language that is unlike the language the AI was trained on, then it's going to work the worst for you. And what happens, therefore, with employers who assume, well, these individuals have been accommodated and we don't need to do anything further because they have AI. Also, because much of the intelligence is in the cloud, they consume a great deal of bandwidth. And this is not a cost that most financial benefit programs such as ODSP or ADP in Ontario recognize. And of course, many of you have probably heard of the hallucinations of AI, and that's a somewhat misleading term. AI is trained to be believable, not to tell the truth. The goal of AI is to produce something that someone can interpret as true or can mimic human assertions or human reasoning. And if we look at what certainly the large language models and the Gen AI is producing, they have been fed on data that is often ableist slurs. They are told in some of the data that disabled people are inferior, unattractive, tragic victims, suffering. There's many bad jokes about disability in that data set. And there's also benevolent ableism, the propagation of what has been called inspiration porn. But even the protections against these tend to backfire. So what we have is captioning toxicity filters, which don't let you talk about critical factors. In our lectures at the university, there is a course on the sex trade, and the students that are reliant on the captioning to understand the lecture are given replacements to the topical words, so they cannot follow the lecture. There are incidences where people with facial difference are canceled from Instagram. And there's an assumption that there is no disability is a topic that should not be spoken about with or that has no sex, or there is that people with disabilities are asexual. So both the image producing systems and the textual producing systems filter that out. But I'm most worried about the extreme risks of AI. AI is also an infrastructure of disability discrimination. The way I like to talk about AI to people that are not familiar with it, and I've been working with AI since the 80s and through multiple generations of AI, all of them are, of course, controlled and produced by people. And that seems to be a point that is missed in some of the dystopian and utopian narratives. The first generation of AI, people told AI, here are the rules, follow them literally and accurately. The second generation of AI, we told the AI, here's available data, use statistical reasoning to optimize the selected metrics. And in the third generation, when everyone started to become aware of AI, we said, here's all the data we have, you figure it out and make new connections and determine weights based on past relationships and possible combinations. The extreme danger of AI is when AI, that second generation of AI, is asked to find, match, sort, label, measure, optimize, calculate, and analyze people at scale. And this is most often applied in the employment arena. There's a problem, and people with disabilities are the collateral damage. And the way AI is currently designed is hostile to difference, and disability implies difference. The problem, of course, precedes AI. AI is simply a power tool. It is taking something that we have done in the past ourselves, and it is mechanizing it. It is mechanizing, accelerating, amplifying, and automating existing patterns based upon data. And all data, of course, is from the past. And it's doing it more efficiently, accurately, and consistently. And thereby, it is propagating discrimination faster, more efficiently, and accurately. And this, unfortunately, despite the fact that there is now a burgeoning AI ethics industry, is missed by AI ethics efforts. And to me, it is an existential flaw in our assumptions about truth and our sense of what is of value. My first alarm to this, and there's probably people in the audience that have heard this story because it's an oft-told story and it's frequently repeated, was when in 2013, so now more than 10 years, more than a decade ago, I was asked by the Ministry of Transport to assess some AI systems that would guide automated vehicles through intersections, and I decided to test them with a capture of a friend of mine who pushes her wheelchair backwards through the intersection. And even people who encounter her in the real world in the intersection often think she's lost control, and they push her back to the side of the intersection that she came from. All of the AI systems that I tested in the simulation chose to run her over, which would effectively, they decided to proceed through the intersection. They assumed that she was moving forward. They all said, these are immature models, come back when we've given them more data about people in wheelchairs and intersections. Now, the point of the story that is frequently missed is what happened then. And this is the most important point about this, is that the systems that were more mature, that had been fed a ton of data about people in wheelchairs and intersections, actually chose to run my friend over with greater confidence. And therein lies the problem with AI ethics efforts, because even within the disability community and the accessibility community, the call is for full proportional representation within the data. It's all about filling the data desert, making sure that people with disabilities are included in the data. But of course, even with full proportional representation, the system is a statistical reasoning machine. And to illustrate that further, and apologies to those who have seen this before as well, one of the things that I've been doing for the last 40 years in the field is to collect from anybody that I meet. I ask them, what do you need to fully participate? What do you need to thrive? And I have this massive set of data, and however I plot it, and the only way to plot it, because the answers are so diverse, is in a high dimensional multivariate scatter plot. And it looks like a normal distribution, and I call it my human starburst. And what you'll note is the pattern that Pareto discovered when he talked about the 80-20 principle. 80% of the needs are clustered around 20% of the middle space, and 20% are distributed throughout the 80% of the peripheral space. And the needs in the middle are close together, meaning they're very similar to each other, and there's huge economies of scale there. But the needs out at the periphery are far apart, meaning they're more different from each other. And of course, the needs of people with disabilities tend to be out at that jagged edge of the human starburst. And the pattern with design and almost anything we encounter in our lives, all technologies, is that design works for the 80% quite well. As you differ from that, it becomes difficult to use. And as your needs are out at the outer edge, most designs, whether it's transportation, housing, the tools we use within an employment, the way we apply for employment, all of those tend not to work. And unfortunately, the same pattern, because we are using statistical reasoning in our research, in our knowledge production, etc. AI is a mechanized statistical reasoning machine. And so what happens is any determination from that second generation of AI is highly accurate in the middle, inaccurate as you move away from the middle, and wrong for anyone out at that jagged edge. And of course, this is an existing pattern, and it feeds into the disparity that we're currently seeing within our society, because we have a fit of most designs if you're average, a misfit if you're not average. The products, especially with Moore's Law, the digital inclusion products, are becoming more available, reliable, functional. The cost is decreasing. But if you are out at that periphery, things are getting worse and worse. Knowledge. I'm a professor. I live in academia. The gold standard of research, truth, evidence, knowledge is based upon statistical reasoning. And the subjects that don't use that are defunded and ignored. And of course, if you can't have statistical power in your research, you're less likely to be published in a journal, you're less likely to get funded, you're less likely to receive tenure and promotion. So we have a vacuum of knowledge about the needs and the realities of people who are out at that outer edge. Education, we are doubling down on standardized learners or students, and we're trying to serve the employment market, which is looking for replaceable workers. And even and as we are defending democracy, and as democracy is under attack, we've reduced it to one person, one vote, without enough attention to human rights. And if you if you focus on one person, one vote, then the trivial needs of the majority will outnumber the critical needs of the minority. And of course, this doesn't just harm people with disabilities, it harms society as a whole. We reduce innovation because we have greater conformance, greater lock-in, less flexibility, less extensibility, and less resilience and responsiveness. And we subject ourselves to mass production, mass communication, mass marketing, and a popularity push, which narrows our focus on the world. So we are, in essence, through our practices and our conventions, and we are amplifying this, we are reducing diversity and denying complexity and homogenizing towards a monoculture, which within an employment scenario makes those organizations that have a monoculture within their organization much more vulnerable to unexpected changes within the environment. And we all know that the two predictions that we can definitely depend upon is death and disability. At some point, all of us or someone we love and we care about quite a bit will be out at that outer edge. And if, however, we design for that entire spectrum, then everyone has room for change and growth. And that is where the innovations occur and where the weak signals of issues to come appear, because people out at the outer edge are most vulnerable to the cracks that are emerging. And it isn't the complacent that have the ideas for how to innovate, because they do not need to change the world. The unfortunate assumptions about pervasively deployed AI hiring tools is that past success equals future success, and optimizing data characteristics associated with past successes increases future successes. And the data characteristics that determine success need not be specified or known to the operators of the AI. So if you're purchasing an AI hiring tool, then you're not told what is the data that this was trained on, or what is the data that is used in each update. And AI, according to the EEOC, the Equitable Employment Organization within the US, is used by more than 90% of organizations, whether they know it or not. There is some form of AI used in employment decision systems. It is employed in recruiting announcements. Where should you publish your announcement regarding a hiring opportunity? It is used in application filtering, in interviews and assessment, in productivity monitors and surveillance, in promotion or disciplinary actions. All of you are probably exposed in some way through your job to AI decision systems. And the bias that is towards an optimal pattern or an success profile that comes in data, and the data, of course, is from the past, equals bias against difference. And of course, people with disabilities are different. AI is getting better and more accurate, but as it gets better and more accurate, it is getting more accurately, efficiently, and consistently discriminatory. And beyond employment, if you have a disability, you're encountering this pattern in all sorts of ways. It is deployed in employment, in academic admissions, in medical calculators and triage tools, in policing and parole systems, in immigration and refugee adjudication, in tax auditing, loans, mortgages, security flagging. At the community level, it is used to make decisions regarding evidence-based government investment, political platforms, public health decisions, urban planning, emergency preparedness systems, security measures, and the more trivial areas such as news coverage, products that will be marketed within any platform, GPS routes, supply chain priority, design features selected by companies who are creating products. And what we have is a series of bad, unfair, inaccurate decisions. And unfortunately, even the positive things that AI produces are problematic for people with disabilities, but also at the other end, people with disabilities, because they're not recognized by the systems, are subject to false flagging in suspicion machines, such as security systems at airports or the CRA auditing, tax auditing. And one of the things that, unfortunately, I've been experiencing since I started to talk about this is that there is an I told you so phenomenon happening in the harm and incident databases that have emerged regarding the impact of AI. There are disproportionate reports related to disability, and those are increasing all the time. And there are some heartbreaking issues that are emerging. Parents with disabilities are falsely flagged as unfit. And there is a rise in iatrogenic death and illness if you're not like the average, and due to the rise in medical calculators. Iatrogenic meaning the death and illness due to the treatment, not to the illness that you're presenting. And unfortunately, most of the field is focused on privacy protections. They think that the harms of AI is that you're losing your privacy. But the reality for people with disabilities is frequently you've already bartered your privacy for essential services. You've had to hit the accept button in order to get things that are essential for you to live. And privacy protections that are there when governments and services assure you that we are private by design, which is usually anonymization at source. If you are unlike the average, if you're highly unique, you will be re-identified. If you're the only person on the block that is ordering, say, I don't know, a prosthetic or a colostomy bag or something of that nature, you will be re-identified. It's easy to figure out who you are and what other data is associated with you. And the other privacy protections that are supposed to be a better means of protecting your privacy, which is called differential privacy, where you remove the data that would identify you through your uniqueness, actually removes the data that is needed to make the AI work for you. And the recovery from data abuse and misuse is not available. If you have had a privacy breach, there's hardly any service that will help you figure out how do you get over this fraud? How do you deal with the financial fraud or with the issues regarding the release of your medical records or your insurance information? But the primary message that I want to give is that statistical reasoning as a means of making decisions does harm. Assuming that we know about the majority, what we know about the majority applies to the minority does harm. And despite all of the AI ethics efforts that are emerging, it's more than addressing data gaps. It's more than removing human bias from algorithms, and it's more than removing the stereotypes from labels and proxies. Statistical discrimination also occurs, unfortunately, in these AI ethics measures. Most of them are based upon impact assessments and upon risk-benefit analyses. And the hugely impactful things that happen to a minority or an outlier are seen as insignificant when determining the metrics and thresholds within these protections, or invisible or insignificant in error testing. There's an interesting study that shows that how many deaths you would have to have before the medical error tests would say that there is harm within a particular medical system or within some of the AI technologies that are released. And I won't get into the details of how determinations are made that there are issues, but suffice it to say that most people with disabilities are falling through the cracks and stranded at the edges of bounded clusters where that are used to determine that something needs to be acted upon. We're invisible in a risk-benefit framework, an anomaly, merely an anecdote. So given all this doom and gloom, and sorry for the very gloomy picture that I'm painting, but I think within AI, because AI is a mirror of our current convention, there's also an opportunity to rethink. And within employment, I think there's an opportunity to rethink human resource processes, because human resources is all about creating replaceable workers, this assumption that people are like these carbon copies of a job description, rather than thinking about diversifying perspectives within our workplaces, investing in human potential, hiring people not based upon a formulaic set of metrics, but looking at how can we foster human potential within these diverse perspectives, and looking at adaptable roles rather than replaceable workers, thinking about how we can adapt the situation within the workplace to the individuals that are part of a team that we've recruited. So how are we addressing trustworthy AI? I talked about progress at the speed of trust. And we're doing quite a number of things, and luckily IDEA is supporting some of these. One of the things that we're doing is just to get across the idea of what is happening in our conventions. How have we done this in the past? And a very, very simple thing is most of you have probably been exposed to word cloud, where there's a question that's posted and everybody's supposed to post an answer to the word or to the question. And so what is your favorite color, or what is the topic that is most top of mind to you? And what will happen is, in a standard word cloud, is the most common, the majority words will grow in size and go to the middle so that everybody attends to them and they pile on. So it becomes this echo chamber. What we've done is we've actually inverted that so that the novel, unique, outlying minority words grow in size and come to the middle, just as, a twig to people's attention. Hey, look at what we're doing here in terms of the topics we pay attention to. Is it only popularity that we should use as a metric for prioritizing? We've also created something called a trust meter, or we're in the process. This is under development, where we're looking at the suitability of the decision system towards the individual or group that you're deciding upon. So based upon the data that is used to train the AI, is this person beyond a threshold of representation within the data where the determination by the AI will be inaccurate? We're doing things like, since it's playing with algorithms, we have an alternative algorithm which we call our lawnmower of justice. Basically, we mow down the Gaussian curve so people who are like other people don't have the advantage, and the AI model needs to attend to a larger spectrum of data. And the one thing that we're working on right now, which I'm quite excited about, is the how would you do it differently project. I was challenged by people that have heard my issues with AI. Well, we'd like to give you an opportunity to do it differently. And how we're doing it differently is we're looking at chatbots for people that need them the most. Who needs communication systems the most? Who needs language systems that assist in language? And so what we're doing is we're working with people who are non-speaking, who basically the community of AAC users who learned or who became literate through Bliss Symbolics, which is a universal symbol language. And this is a very community-driven project where it is the end users who are the individuals that are designing the system and who are determining what the design decisions should be. And rather than basing it upon the average or the typical or the majority, we're creating a system that can be one size fits one, that is deeply individualized to each individual AAC communicator. And we call it the Baby Bliss Spot project. And what I have up on the screen is the Bliss Symbolics representation of Baby Bliss Spot. And Bliss was a universal symbol language that was developed by Charles Bliss during the Second World War. He saw it as a means of connecting across languages and across cultures. And rather than being a phonetic language, and of course, phonetic languages are very difficult if you're not speaking. If you're a child who cannot speak, you cannot sound out the words. So the phonemes are very mysterious things because you're not able to produce the phonemes. And therefore, there's a huge barrier to literacy. But also these children tend to have issues with motor control. As they approach employment, the other really interesting thing about Bliss is you're able, with only a few symbols, to communicate a very abstract and complex message, because each of the symbols is very, very heavily meaning laden. And so rather than having to type out 200, say, letters, even if it's using words, which if you are using single switch scanning can take a huge amount of time. At each point, there's an opportunity for error. You can choose a few symbols and the meaning is clear. Unlike, say, if you are saying bank and people don't know, are you talking about a bank or the bank of a river? Bliss symbols are ideographic, they're symbolic, and each of the symbols has the meaning within it rather than the phonetic pronunciation. And what we're looking at is how can we use this Baby Bliss bot to allow individuals that have faced the greatest barrier to employment, but also to communication, to be able to communicate effectively and efficiently and to be understood. And this is a project that has participation from many countries and many experts in AI, linguistics, a whole range of, I mean, there are more than 9 disciplines, more than 9 countries, and we are attempting to do quite a number of interesting things with it. The associated with this is a project we call Mad Escapes from the Grid. One of the things that we discovered is in working with the individuals seeking employment who rely on AAC, frequently the vocabulary available to you is dictated by a grid or an on-screen keyboard. And unfortunately, unlike many of the other technologies, there are actually fewer choices available to you if you're non-speaking than there were in the 80s, or fewer ways in which you can access the technology. So most people that have few voluntary movements and cannot directly point to an item that they want to choose are dependent on something called single switch row column scanning, where you hit the switch and it scans through a set of rows, and then you hit the switch again in columns, and then you hit the switch again when it arrives at the selection that you want. And so this is obviously extremely inefficient and extremely slow. And so we're also looking at how do we use AI to be able to recognize other voluntary movements that can be reliably made, and then assign those to different actions? And how can we create a display of possible choices in such a way that it matches our the way that we formulate messages, or the way that we think about what are the choices in the way that we want to communicate a message. With that, we are adding context awareness, awareness about who the partner is, such that this system, this baby bliss bot, will be a companion that will stand in for the familiar companion that people have relied upon in many situations, especially when those companions either pass away or the trusted aid or friend is not available. And then the other thing we're doing is we are in the midst of or we have drafted a regulatory standard for the Accessible Canada Act called the Accessible and Equitable AI Standard. And it will be released before the actual regulation is available as a guidance document from ASC. And within that, we are layering it on top of other AI protections such as ADA or the EU AI Act, which you may have heard about in the news, or the US AI initiatives through NIST, or the Directive on Automated Decision Systems. According to the OECD, there are now over 800 either regulatory documents being drafted, or guidance or commitments or MOUs regarding protections for AI, but none of them, unfortunately, contain the four things that we are looking at, which is accessibility of the AI ecosystem, not just for people with disabilities as consumers of AI, but also as developers, designers, implementers, monitors, evaluators of AI. And then we wish to deal with statistical discrimination, so more than the data gaps or the privacy breaches, etc., that are addressed within the other protections. And because most of the other legislation is looking at impact assessments or risk assessments, and no protections are needed if something is deemed to be of low risk or low impact or medium impact or medium risk. One of the things we also want to pay attention to is cumulative harm. If every decision, what is deemed to be low risk or low impact decision is against you, then it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And how do we address that? And then lastly, we want to make sure that when people learn about AI, they also learn about equitable and accessible AI, and that people with disabilities can participate in AI education, that AI education is accessible. And this is seen as the first phase of a series of regulatory standards that we will release in this area. And it is in 4 parts. One about accessible AI, one about equitable AI, one about organizational processes that support accessible and equitable AI, and one about those education concerns. And IDEA has been supporting us in making sure that people with disabilities in these standards committees have the capacity to be able to advocate and are not sitting on the committee in an inequitable decision, because certainly the regulated entities and the industry is well resourced with the research and the knowledge and the technical resources to be able to argue their point. And we want to make sure that people with disabilities also have the resources to be able to understand the arguments in the technologies. So we've been producing visualizations and case examples, and we have created an accessible guidance document that will be shortly released. And amongst those are ways in which we're trying to make the the AI process and what is needed in terms of the protections as understandable as possible. And what I'm showing on the screen at the moment is a flow chart. And you will have access to this PowerPoint presentation. So there it is described in great detail. So to conclude, what we want is we want AI to move forward, to take advantage of those extreme opportunities, but at the speed of trust, and trust that is earned and trust that is proven. And for a plug, I also want to tell you about a conference that we'll be holding on May 27th and 28th called Accessible Canada, Accessible World. And this will be one of the topics that we'll be discussing there. We're running it like a flipped classroom where the presentations will be available ahead of time, and we will use the time together either online or in Montreal at Concordia University to develop plans and strategies for how to address a series of critical problems like this problem with AI. But I want to leave you with the note that intelligence that works with the edge of our human scatterplot is better able to adapt to change and respond to the unexpected, detect risk, transfer to new contexts, results in greater dynamic resilience and longevity, will reduce disparity, and may hold the key to our survival. And certainly within the employment sector, that is what organizations need, because we're in a fairly rocky future at the moment. And I'd love to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Yuta, for a very thought-provoking presentation. We're going to get to some questions since we have a few minutes left, if that's okay with you. There are a couple of comments, positive comments about your idea of inverting the process regarding the word cloud, flipping perspective, and also statements regarding adaptable roles rather than the replaceable workers from a human resources perspective. So just want to share that with you. We're going to get to a couple of specific questions. One of the questions that we have is regarding whether art and collaborations with artists can play a role in creating an AI that does not automate existing patterns and thereby can propagate biases and discriminations. And if you have any advice on how AI researchers can or should approach collaborations with artists.
Yeah, so I think I mean, one of the distressing things to see is that in education, a lot of the talk of AI is we need more STEM, we need more engineers, we need prompt engineers, we need, but I think when we look at the trajectory of where's work going, and what is the future of work, what we actually need are critical thinkers. We need people who cannot, I mean, STEM is formulaic, and AI is great at replacing formulaic things. If we're preparing our students to become or to be adept at those formulaic things, then we're creating this collision course. So I think the future is in art, in the humanities, in that human judgment, and art. Artists and designers play a huge role there. Because we need that human creativity, that uniqueness, that way of differentiating yourself by poking at our perceptions, at making people think. And unfortunately, at the moment, art and design is all worried about Gen AI, and is Gen AI going to...
Hey, you gotta take him away.
Is Gen AI going to replace the artists, etc.? But no, I definitely don't think so. There's a talk that we just recently gave about art and design and AI and the possibilities that AI can do some of the mundane formulaic things that artists rely upon, but it will act as a way of increasing or as a platform upon which to show and advance that human ingenuity and human creativity.
Thank you, Yuta. There's another question specifically about the blitz symbols that you talked about earlier. And the question is regarding whether the blitz symbols can be usable by someone with aphasia, someone that has damage to the language center of the brain, as opposed to being physically unable to speak.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating area, because they're symbolic, and they are like the Chinese writing system. The symbols actually look like what they're representing, but they're not pictorial. With picture systems, it tends to be very concrete. It's very hard to talk about abstract concepts when you're using pictures. So there is some research that shows that it is easier for someone with aphasia who has damage to their language centers, and especially, well, they're depending upon where the aphasia came from, or I mean, what is the neurological cause of the aphasia, that bliss symbols are far easier to use than phonemes and phonetic systems. The other good thing about bliss symbolics is that it can be very telegraphic, so that you don't need to choose very many things to get your message out. And actually, what we're doing with the Baby Bliss Bot is this bag of words strategy. So you can pick a set of words in any order. You don't need to worry about syntax or grammar. You just give the meaning concepts, and what large language models are actually quite adept at providing then is a proper sentence using those words. It is able to deduce that if I say door, cold, it'll, please close the door, I'm getting cold, or whatever. So we're using the intelligence that is already within the large language model. The one bad effect of that is that some of our AAC users are saying, well, that doesn't sound like me anymore. Like their quirky turn of phrase, the jocular way in which they interact is lost, or is overcome by the large language model. And so we're starting with mostly transactional, but now we're also tuning the AI to be more like, or to use the idioms and the turn of phrase that these AAC user is comfortable with.
Fascinating. So we're just at about 1 o'clock now. There's a couple more general questions on the Q&A section, but I'm afraid that we don't have time to get to it. So we'll try to send them to you so that you can respond to them. We are going to have the PowerPoint presentations available for the attendees as well. So on behalf of IDEA, I want to thank you for taking the time to present, and of course, all the attendees as well. I hope you all enjoy the presentation and come back for our next sessions or our next speaker series, and stay tuned. Thank you very much, and have a good day, everyone.
And thank you, everyone.